Tim Dillon is known for his comedy across the world, but today his show has changed into something much more impactful. Now he's using his voice to expose the corrupt elites that are sending us into a dystopian future.
Can we give Palantir the benefit of the doubt? Yes, one of their founders is obsessed with Satan, so we all have a thing. It does seem like they are going to make money from enslaving the human race and keeping it in a constant state of war. Kash Patel's not running the FBI. It's obvious. I don't know who's running the FBI, neither do you, but Kash Patel's not it. He's a figurehead. This is a op. They're gonna start purchasing influencers. I'm telling you, this is the new way.
He's called out countless figures over the years, but in the early days, it was mainly smug mainstream comedians that he was beefing with. But recently, he's been taking things to a whole new level. He set his sights on the worst, the tech elite, corrupt politicians, and the biased media. All the people he sees as corrupting the Western world. And he's not wrong with it. Which is why it's so satisfying to see him not hold back anymore. Which is a slightly different perspective from his friend Joe Rogan, who's had a similar journey but is taking a different path.
If we don't get there first, then it's probably a wrap. If you really thought about it, like if China gets there first, if control of resources and everything's shut off,
like
whatever, what if it's weaponized?
My worry is that in the guise of fighting China, we're going to become China. I would take the government a lot more seriously if they weren't potentially having, saying Palantir should merge all these different government databases. So your health data and your criminal justice data and your tax data all merges. And who's doing that? Palantir.
It can be hard to disagree with a friend, especially when you share a platform in the podcast business. And Tim Dillon honestly credits his first appearance on the Joe Rogan podcast in 2019 as the moment his career really took off. And now he's a regular guest, so it's not exactly the easiest environment to have a disagreement, especially as Joe Rogan practically launched his career. His conversations with Joe are always friendly, which is a very different tone to his own show, even when they're talking about the same topics.
If China unleashes the AI demon before we unleash our AI demon, our American AI demon, Western values, America, rah-rah AI demon, and China enslaves their population with their demon, they will sell the world their demon, and then that demon will enslave the world, and then they'll make all the money, and they'll have all the geopolitical leverage, and they'll have all the military advantages. So in this, quote, AI arms race, we are both racing, the US and China, to give birth to an ancient Sumerian super intelligent demon.
Dillon is unapologetically himself. It's part of who he is as a person. That's a big reason people love his show. He barely cared when he was fired from the Riyadh Comedy Festival in Saudi Arabia, and he's not afraid of voicing any of his opinions, even if he doesn't agree with a friend.
Have you gotten any invites to any bunkers?
No, they're not.
Do you think you'd feel differently if you did?
I don't know. I
know you've had invites to do interesting things.
I've had invites to Teal, and I've said no because I think, he'd probably sit me down and go, listen to me, you fat f***, you're going to shut your mouth. And I'd sit there and I'd go, Arr!
Unlike Joe, you can see how Dillon has viciously criticized Palantir and Peter Thiel for endless hours on his YouTube show. In this episode, he went through Palantir's public manifesto, which calls for over 20 different political, social, and economic changes to the Western world. Considering the fact that this is a private company, it isn't very clear why they published this, and it comes off as more like propaganda than a routine press release.
Can we give Palantir the benefit of the doubt? Yes, one of their founders is obsessed with Satan, so we all have a thing. And yes, the other one just said we're going to be in a war with every country on earth. Whatever. But I want to give them the fair shake. It does seem like they are going to make money from enslaving the human race and keeping it in a constant state of war.
This insane and hypocritical manifesto also talks about how Silicon Valley should be involved in combating violent crime. That criticism of the billionaire class is thinly veiled scorn, and even advocates for mandatory military service.
National service should be a universal duty. We should, as a society, seriously consider moving away from an all-volunteer force and only fight the next war if everyone shares in the risk and the cost. So what Palantir is saying here is we need to move into become a warlike society. We need to be a warlike Spartan society.
In some ways, it's a clearer and more relatable analysis than what mainstream journalism manages to achieve, even if it is obviously ironic and intended to be comedic. He uses clear evidence while saying what everyone's already thinking but no one has the guts to say. So rather than learn from figures like Tim Dillon and why he's so popular to begin with, the media instead largely accused him of being a right-wing grifter, mainly because he was criticizing the left wing.
Do you feel like you're part of a new establishment that's being created?
I don't think I'm part of a new establishment. So the idea that like the power that Theo Von has would be equal to like the intelligence agencies or these massive legacy media institutions seems crazy. When you use the term establishment, I think that that's more than just having an audience. That's having an institutional component that I don't think we have. But I think legacy media does. I think the government and the intelligence communities do. I think Hollywood certainly does.
Although most of the mainstream media lumped Dillon in with a group that they claim supported the right wing, it's never been clear if he had any particular political biases. He's mocked almost everyone over the years, and he's changed his opinions drastically depending on political events, as after all, he's a comedian. But to be fair, there were some interesting signs. Like Joe Rogan and Theo Von, he had JD Vance on his podcast in the run-up to the election. It was a relaxed conversation and they agreed on a lot. It's why audiences across alternative media liked him. It's why people thought that this administration was actually going to bring meaningful change. That finally they would get to the bottom of Epstein and bring an end to America's wars abroad. On their podcast together, Dillon and JD Vance even agreed on this exact point.
Our interest, I think, very much is in not going to war with Iran, right? It would be a huge distraction of resources. It would be massively expensive to our country.
But this administration then did a complete U-turn on this issue, which Dillon says was a betrayal of the MAGA movement.
This turn to Iran, to interventionism, to me feels like the biggest betrayal of a political movement I've ever seen in my life. And you also have like a lot of the Republican donor class, people like Miriam Adelson, that have given Trump a lot of money, who are very fervently pro-Iran war and believe that regime needs to be taken out. And they started lobbying for that, I think, many years before it happened.
After these events in the last year, Dillon has completely turned on JD Vance and everyone like him, talking about his close links to people like Peter Thiel in the tech elite.
Vance is owned by other donors, by the way. Vance is not without donors. If you want to know who Vance's donors are, go look at that Peter Thiel list.
Because JD Vance was actually poached by Peter Thiel as early as 2015 when Vance was in law school. Peter Thiel invited him to join his investment firm and later gave him crucial funds to start his own firm, Naya Capital. Since that time, he's been a constant figure in Vance's career, all the way to his Senate run. In fact, Peter Thiel was his single biggest backer, donating $15 million to his campaign. He even leveraged his Silicon Valley connections to help Vance hire tech donors, and nurtured his ideology to what it is today. Tim Dillon unpacks it all clearly when he analyzes this interview with JD Vance.
The thing I really worry about with AI is surveillance. AI is, a friend of mine once said that AI is fundamentally a communist technology in that it allows governments and corporations to surveil people in very profound and different ways. And that scares me a lot. Like, I don't want a social credit system that's powered by AI. I don't want you to not be able to buy a beer because some tech CEO has given you a
Stop
score.
it for a minute. Stop it. Who are these tech CEOs? Like, he says some tech CEO as if he's not sponsored by the tech CEOs and friends with the tech CEOs.
It doesn't really make logical sense. Why is JD Vance worrying about the very same things his donors and associates are responsible for? He spends this interview framing himself as having simple and relatable anxieties, and then he says this.
But I don't think we're gonna have mass unemployment. We might have mass inequality. That's its own problem. It's a different problem though.
Interesting. Good. Well, the good news is we won't have mass unemployment. The bad news is we might have like Calcutta-style slums. So we will have mass inequality. That might suck. I don't know how we get there with that mass unemployment.
But quickly, I just want to say that this is really interesting. Every time I look at these videos, I notice most of you aren't subscribed. But oftentimes, this is because you're actually getting unsubscribed from the channel just randomly. So please, just a quick favor, could you just check if you hit the subscribe button if you regularly view these videos? as we're approaching a significant landmark on this channel in terms of subscribers. So if there's one free thing you can do to help us and everyone who makes these videos, it's just to hit that subscribe button and double check if you've hit it. It's the only thing I'll ever ask of you. And in return, I'll make sure every week, every year, we uncover information nobody else wants to talk about. I won't let you down on that, so just please help us with a subscribe. I really appreciate it. Let's continue with the video. So with all of this insanity playing out, it does make you wonder just how society ever got to this point, where comedians are now seemingly the arbiters of truth. Well, on deeper analysis, it begins to make sense. One of my favorite authors on this topic was Christopher Lasch. He was way ahead of his time, and throughout his life he argued that the biggest threat to democracy actually came from the elite class. Today this seems obvious, but back then in the 1900s, this was a unique take. While the elites in America talked a lot about freedom, justice, and the American dream, in reality, they were quickly betraying all the ideals that Western life was based on. The elites were becoming so detached from society by separating themselves physically and socially from the citizens, and in turn, they abandoned their civic responsibilities. Instead of investing back into the cities and civilization that gave them all this prosperity, through investing in libraries, charities, and public works, they began to isolate, hiding in the hills, never even having to look or talk to normal people. The result was a complete detachment from what everyone else had to live through. All whilst the elite saw the normal servant class as being the ones as to cause all the issues to themselves, rather than something being wrong with the system itself. In turn, this created an even more narcissistic society, where our entire society basically became based on personal pleasure and achievement. Achievement in the sense that you make your money not for the greater good of society or any virtuous reason, but only for the immediate pleasures you desire. Suddenly everything took on this ideology. Advertising, media, all these big influencers constantly tell you that you aren't satisfied, and that your value as a person is solely based on your financial success and material wealth. In Lasch's book, The Culture of Narcissism, he says directly, the dream of success has been drained of any meaning beyond itself, and this is the same conclusion that Tim Dillon has come to.
We're really pushing this idea that the only route to happiness is this upwardly mobile vertical where you have to grab everything and be a boss and be an entrepreneur and run an empire, and that's the way to happiness. That's not the way to happiness. That's what we're pushing. We're not telling everybody they can be anything they want to be so that we have a lot of challenges to like our ideas and stuff. We're not looking for that type of feedback. We just want people going out and working themselves to death.
The Culture of Narcissism also argues that America is producing a personality type consistent with the clinical definitions of pathological narcissism. Not only are we trapped in the system, but it's actually changing how we think and feel at a fundamental level, and is turning people into empty husks that only care about feeding into the system. In Tim Dillon's own warnings, he regularly talks about this, how the megacities of America are breaking people down and draining the soul out of society.
The people are hollow, they're empty, they don't exist. All the people you meet in LA are figments of your imagination. They're fractals, they're not real, you didn't meet them. They are an entity of which they go between worlds, but they're not physically in reality the way that you are or I am.
He also constantly calls out the state of the modern economy, how it's disenfranchised the workers and destroyed people's chances of becoming homeowners. It's summed up pretty well by this runt when he called the system a Willy Wonka economy.
They are developing the Willy Wonka chocolate factory into a luxury condo. And then all of their clients, many of them foreign, buy condos in the Willy Wonka chocolate factory that they visit a few months out of the year. They don't care. They don't care. And you know what all is left of the chocolate factory? A couple of murals on the wall of chocolate, okay? But just chocolate. They don't show Willy or the Oompa Loompas, because people would ask when they were in the lobby, where did the Oompa Loompas go? And they go, oh, they're on heroin. They're on heroin. But what I mean is that they had a community, they had a life, they had things going on. The Oompa Loompa could have it could have a wife, and then you could have Oompa Loompa children. Now we say to the Oompa Loompas, I hope you got your Bitcoin. Oh, are you invested in crypto? No. I'm trying to make the chocolate bar. Oh, we don't do that here anymore. Sorry, the factory's in China. Go work at Panera. So that's what America is. It's an Oompa Loompa at Panera.
Looking back at Tim Dillon's past, his frustration of the establishment isn't really a trending topic to him, as he's lived through all of this himself, being in the servant class, and seen how hard it is to escape. He started using drugs like coke at the age of 12 when his parents started divorce proceedings, while his mum was suffering from schizophrenia. This led him to roaming around crack houses in his teenage years. During his 20s, things only got worse, and the economic crash left him stuck in New York, financially ruined in a dead-end job where he had to share an apartment with a shower in the kitchen. Through this, he lived really what most of us have to go through, and after seeing how dystopian modern life has become, he compared it to previous generations after being influenced by this environment. He even titled his 2024 book Death by Boomers, how the worst generation destroyed the planet but first a child.
The book is specifically about
my boomer parents and boomers in general,
and
growing up
in
in the 90s. Yeah, it's like a fun
satirical
autobiography, but it's really about the type of people that I grew up with. They're actually better off than the wealthy people because at some level of rich, you have to think about other things.
Yeah.
They had just enough money. All it did was corrupt them and destroy their children. And that's all it needed to do. They never thought about civic virtue or angling for position. They just wanted a Lexus and a timeshare at a golf resort.
It's these people that Tim Dillon first has a problem with. A fake society corrupted by propaganda and illusion who only care about themselves, not the greater good of society. The very people Christopher Lasch is speaking about in the Culture of Narcissism book. But cut to now, and these problems are infinitely worse, and Dillon has now seen the complete flip side of American life. As he's become hugely successful and famous, he's been able to hang out with prominent politicians like RFK Jr. and JD Vance. He's been invited to the Peter Thiel parties, lived in Beverly Hills, and knows what it's like to live the elite life. Before, he would never speak much of this elite group, but now he does, and his friendships have imploded, his business relationships have fallen apart, and he's truly realized the depravity of the world of the elites. But actually, when you put it all together, it's almost like he's been criticizing the same group of entitled people his entire life. In the past, he saw how society had warped the average person, but today he's witnessing firsthand this corruption play out at the top of society. And Tim Dillon's previous feud with mainstream media took him to a friendship with Bari Weiss. But even this relationship with a supposed free speech advocate ended in disaster. Weiss was a journalist who spoke out against DEI and said she quit the New York Times because they persecuted her for her views. She made the rounds on alternative media, including on the Joe Rogan podcast. When they were friends, she invited Tim Dillon to do a stand-up gig when she ran a debate on feminism. However, since then, things have taken a turn for the worst, and Bari Weiss has seemingly abandoned her principles.
She texted me and was like, you're part of a world in which people are anti-Semitic. And I'm like, well, what am I doing? And she's like, you're part of this thing. And I was like, well, that's like, what is this guilt by association? The thing that she hated and the thing that she crusaded against was this whole idea that like she's applying the same principles that she supposedly didn't like, which is like, if you're willing to have a conversation with somebody, you endorse every one of their views.
Since they fell out, Tim Dillon has dressed up in drag as Bari Weiss on his show, endlessly clowning on her for the disastrous takeover of CBS News. One of the reasons he says Bari was angry was because he dressed up as a rabbi on this episode, yet just a few weeks earlier he dressed up as an Arab sheikh, and no one really seemed to care about that.
Barry is committed to delivering fearless, unbiased journalism, and she is incredibly aware of what a shill you people think she is, but she is not. She is not a shill, and nor am I. I want to thank the Ellison family. I want to thank Paramount. I want to thank everybody who invested severely in me and Barry and the whole team at the Free Press. The investments made were intense. They were severe.
Her takeover of CBS all started when Larry Ellison's Paramount purchased her new publication, The Free Press, for $150 million. Larry Ellison is the infamously powerful billionaire who bought up huge sections of the media industry in the last year, including Paramount, CNN, MTV, HBO, Warner Bros, and of course CBS News. Bari Weiss moved over to run CBS News as editor-in-chief the exact same day as The Free Press was sold to Ellison.
It's $250 million for Bari Weiss's blog, in which she interviewed megastar Ross Douthat from the New York Times about why conspiracies have taken the hold of the American mind. And Ross goes, well, you know, the thing about conspiracies is there's an element of truth. Not in this one. There's not an element of truth. It's that it's all truth. It's all the elements of all of the truth. And everyone talks about, like, everyone's like, oh, the grift is to go against Israel. It's like, clearly not. The grift is $250,000 for the blog.
Larry Ellison's takeover made some people, including Dillon, allege that CBS was under threat of becoming a biased news organization due to Ellison's massive share over AI infrastructure with Oracle, his growing media empire trying to strangle the flow of information in America, and also his donations to the Israeli military, which might be why CBS ratings have now hit an all-time low. Bari has completely detached herself from the staff, which has been called the barricade. She has security detail costing CBS $10,000 a day while laying off veteran members of staff that have been there for decades. Even Scott Pelley, who had worked at CBS for 37 years, was fired after he clashed with the change in leadership.
The mark of a great boss is to be ushered into a building with security and then ushered out again like the president. That's when you know you're killing it, when you're doing a great job, when you are afraid to face the people whose lives you are ruining.
What's interesting here is how effective Tim Dillon's style is when it comes to discussing a lot of these disturbing and bizarre problems. His comedy cuts through the fake and fabricated modern world and always seems to be able to extract the essence of a story for his viewers. And in a weird way, this is also what journalism is supposed to do. The difference is that today, that role has been taken up by comedians when the mainstream media has failed. Instead of trying to adapt to the changes in the media landscape, most legacy institutions prefer just to target people like Tim Dillon. But in the end, these hit pieces never work. No matter all the interviews and vicious attacks, it always results with the same anti-establishment voices bouncing back, sometimes with even bigger audiences than before. Dillon doesn't care if the establishment is offended or upset at him. All that's important is being funny and brutally honest, and he knows that this is exactly what his audience is looking for. It's likely his fans will never get tired of this brutally honest style of comedy, especially as more and more people look for alternative voices to help them understand what's really going on in this dystopian world we live in.